And today, with Dr. Mitra Rea and Dr. Cindy Scholes, we get to talk about rest. So let me tell you, the REST stands for, it's an innovative mind-body technology. It's the fastest and most effective tool available to break through the blocks that are currently holding you back from creating long-lasting success. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Cindy. She's a UCSF-trained neuroscientist and medical hypnotherapist. She's worked with hundreds of clients, helping them reduce stress so they can be their best selves. During her 17-year mission to transform mental wellness, she created REST, which stands for Rapid Reprogramming of Emotional Stress Technique. She believes when you optimize brain function, your authentic self will be freed and empowered to lead a purposeful life. Dr. Mitra Rea, many of you may know her. Maybe you've read her books. I've been following her for over 13 years now. She studied brain chemistry at Stanford Medical School. And today she uses a multidisciplinary, holistic approach with people around the world to help them optimize brain function. She shares what she continues to learn around the world, and she currently holds seminars in the US, Canada, throughout Europe, and has sold over 1 million copies of her books, From Here to Longevity, and You Have the Guts to Be Beautiful. Okay, so question number one for both of you guys, I'm just wondering if we could start out with just telling us a little bit about you and your journeys and what brought you to creating and utilizing the REST technique.
I can start because I'm reflecting back on how this got started. After I finished my PhD in neuroscience from UCSF, I created a successful career sharing nutrition and leading a team of healers and doctors in just spreading the word about how we can take control of our own wellness. And I had quite the successful business. Dr. Mitra Rea was a big part of my success. We were friends for forever. And she introduced me to that. And so it was really a nice fit for me. And then I had kids. In having 2 children, I found that doing both jobs well. And my inner critic got the best of me. And I remember I actually had postpartum depression with my second. Like, reflecting back on it, I really get that's what was going on. But I remember really vividly one time being in my office on a call with a physician, talking to her about her business. And my nanny had lost control of the kids, and my daughter was screaming at the door of my home office. And I just had a reaction, really an automatic reaction, which came from this thought: I can't do this. She's gonna know I'm a bad mom, and I can't be that. And I told her right there on the phone, I said, and I just have to say, this was the worst decision of my life, but it was an automatic reaction to the stress. And if I could go back and do it again, I would. But I said to her, I quit. I am done. I can't do this anymore. Good luck. I hope you do well. I'll talk to you another time. And I hung up the phone and I quit that successful business that I had been doing. And it had been something that I was as equally passionate about it, honestly, as I was about raising my kids. But my inner critic really got to me and sabotaged what my life purpose was in that moment. And it took me, actually, I will have to say, several months of being just immersed into a deeper depression before I came out and realized, wait a minute, my life is not over. I do have something to live for, and I want to live it. And I started looking for, how do I get rid of these stress reaction patterns that sabotage me? And so over a number of years, I started as a hypnotherapist, learning that technique. It was fantastic. I taught hypnobirthing for a long time because I had used hypnosis to birth my children without even really knowing that's what I was doing, something Mitra did. Eventually, I stumbled upon a number of different techniques. And as I started working on myself, I decided to bring those to my clients. I started a business serving women in particular to help them live their life on purpose and get out of their clutter of their own minds and help them decrease their stress so they could do what they really want to do. And so in the hundreds and thousands of sessions that I did, I learned all these different techniques. I am passionate about learning how the human mind works. I mean, that's why I went and got my PhD in neuroscience in the first place. And so I kept getting new information, and I started realizing that I could take those techniques and take the best, most effective and efficient parts of them, understanding how they were actually working in the nervous system. And I put together the REST technology, which is the rapid reprogramming of emotional stress technique. And it is the most efficient, fastest way to increase resilience overnight so that we don't have to be burdened by automatic stress reactions that sabotage our real soul purpose. Started sharing with other practitioners how to do REST. I've had several students now that are certified. It works just as well for them and their clients as it has for me. And in fact, that's how Mitra came she's been in my life the whole time, but came back and evolved into the REST. So Mitra, I don't know if you want to tell your story.
Just to kind of give you guys an idea, Cindy and I have been friends since graduate school. So we met actually at Stanford, and then she went off and went to UCSF to finish her PhD. And so we've been friends for a very long time, and we've led like kind of parallel lives. We've had kids together, kind of left academia together, if you will, in search of our own vision of how we could help people with their health using scientifically proven alternative modalities is how I'd like to present it. I have a very open mind, so does Cindy. Both, we're two very curious souls, let's put it that way. And we're always looking at things. We've been bouncing ideas back and forth, starting with hypnotherapy, with birthing my second, and telling her about it. And she's like, oh, that's what I was doing. I was like, yeah, I think you naturally do that. And, so it's just, we've led these parallel lives. And when Cindy first started using some of this technology, I remember back in 2005, I was her guinea pig when she started to learn some of these other technologies to help people reduce their stress. And I will tell you, I would not be where I am today without having Cindy as somebody who practiced on me. And I saw her get better and better and more efficient. And whenever I had issues, spent lots and lots of money hiring business coaches and other ways of improving myself as a business person, because I was an academic trying to make it in the business world. And one of the things I will tell you is all that money, I might as well have just flushed it down the drain, because I am a believer that you are the best director of your life. You just got to get your brain working right. What keeps us from functioning at our highest level is old memories. We get stuck in the past, or we worry about the future. If we could just be present in the moment fully with your entire prefrontal cortex firing exactly what it needed to, or if you're getting a good night's sleep where you're taking the events of the day and resynthesizing, coming up with, your brain is doing so much learning and so much processing. It's trying to figure out how to do life better the next day. That's what it does when it's sleeping at night. But all of that requires that your brain not be stuck in these emotional patterns. And so when Cindy started to kind of laser in on a technology, one of the things I would do is I would send people her way, but you had to go visit her. And I kept saying to her, me along with some of her other clients who were very busy people, like I know one of them is a pilot for the US, armed forces. And so she's all over the place. So these people needed the help, but they couldn't necessarily fly in to see her. So she had motivation to take this technology and make it accessible remotely. And when she figured out that piece, I got certified in the technology, and I just said, the world needs this, Cindy. I already had a very busy life, but I was pulled into this. I had no other choice but to say, Cindy, we have to bring this to the world. This is so amazing. And so this is a brand new business, really, in bringing this opportunity to people. And we are on a mission, actually, to certify other healers in this technology. It's such a useful technology that I believe everyone should have in their tool belt. We've already run a couple of successful retreats where we graduated one class already. We're graduating another class of practitioners, and it is a life-changing. And when I say life-changing, I cannot stress that enough, because I've done landmark education. I've done decades of landmark education. I'm a Reiki master. I've done so many things. I've studied shamanic medicine. I have traveled the world. I'm a 500-hour yoga instructor, a certified yoga instructor as well. There's not much that I haven't studied, but rest is so compelling, and how efficient it is. You could do 10 years of talk therapy and not get the result that you could get in just 3 to 5 sessions of rest. Sorry, I'm getting really excited.
I'm feeling it. I'm like, okay, I can't wait to hear. And, you know, I just have to say, as we're sitting here chatting, when I say that I have deep respect for both of these women, we had the opportunity to spend Thanksgiving together and swim with the dolphins back in 2012 on the Big Island. And when I say that we handpick experts, these women are really worthy of listening to. And okay, so let's move on. Anything about kind of who are we talking to? So obviously there's kind of 2 prongs here. There's the women who might want to schedule sessions, but then there's also what sounds like this big empowerment right now to actually train other practitioners to get certified. And so obviously we're very passionate about nutrition and physiology and lifestyle change. And this, I am guessing, kind of goes on top of or replaces, but who are the women? If you were to say, these are the women that should really perk up, can you answer that question?
Yeah, I kind of started to answer it. I mean, look, everybody could use 5 to 10 rest sessions as a minimum, everybody. But that's part of the tuition, is that you do 3 sessions minimum. Plus, when you go to the retreat itself, it's like session after session. You are just breaking yourself down and rebuilding yourself up, so you can be like the magnificent healer that you were meant to be. Understand what it is to be a healer without your own stuff coming up. And we've created this community of rest practitioners, so that when your stuff comes up, instead of I think the first thing is to even recognize. So many people say to me, "Oh, you know, I don't really have trauma. I didn't have childhood trauma, or I don't really feel stressed." You know, I think Cindy's going to go into this a little bit more. We are actually looking for, through this avenue, I would say, more practitioners to be. And we want to introduce people to this technology. You will get your rest sessions in the process of becoming a rest practitioner. Certainly you can sign up to be a rest, to do some rest sessions with us. But what we're really promoting here is the technology itself, and the idea that maybe, you know, we are working with people that work with nutrition, work with, you know, other modalities, and we are creating a business model where rest is part of that business model, along with supporting nutrition and whatever else you're doing. So that's the model we're creating.
Okay, so what is rest, and how is it different? Anything else that you want to add as compared to someone who might be, I don't know, going to a traditional practitioner, a hypnotherapist, someone who's doing muscle testing? How is this different?
And I do want to address that, because since I was trained originally as a hypnotherapist, well, originally as a neuroscientist, and then as a hypnotherapist, in terms of working with people, hypnosis is a super efficient and effective way to get access to the subconscious mind. What it does best, though, is it delivers new information into the subconscious. It helps program your mind. And what I found as a hypnotherapist is that you could program positive stuff into your mind over and over and over again with hypnosis. But as powerful as that technique, if there was an underlying stress pattern that we hadn't recognized, that was like a belief system that was limiting, very often that would just take over immediately, and whatever hypnosis we did would just fall apart, and the stress pattern would come back and sabotage it. I mentioned earlier about myself and having my inner critic. Like, that's just a part of myself. So the inner critic is a part of myself that was just this particular type of stress pattern that at the time it was interfering. I did not get it as something that as a way to work with myself. That I learned kind of more when I was doing hypnosis. But to actually be able to tame that inner critic, to treat my inner critic like she's an employee instead of she's just me freaking out about whatever's going on. To be able to really work with my inner critic, hypnosis helped me identify her, but rest is what really helped me tame her and train her. And so the rest goes so much deeper and more effective. And the reason is because things like your inner critic is really trauma that's coming back as a reaction. It's not a memory. And so the inner critic is a construct, a self-construct. And I won't talk a whole lot more about the inner critic, but it's a self-construct that's made up of a whole bunch of traumatic reactions that I don't actually remember. When we're young, what happens to us gets remembered, it gets stored in our nervous system, but it gets stored as an implicit memory. That means it gets stored in our body. And you've heard people talk about cellular memories. Well, cellular memories are just implicit memories. They're memories that are stored in the body and part of the nervous system that is not your conscious mind. It's your subconscious mind. So what happens in childhood doesn't stay in childhood. It gets recorded in your subconscious mind. And then later, when you're an adult, if something similar happens, that recorded program, that learned stress response pattern will get triggered and will show up again. And that's what happened for me when I was on the phone with that doctor, is I just got this, like, I can't do this. And I freaked out with this automatic. Now, I did it very gracefully, but it was still a freak out. And I just want to say a little bit about how that happens. And what happens is that once you have one of those traumas, your brain learns now how to react, and it reacts from the stress response. And that stress response, and I know you've had other people talk about it, but the stress response actually causes a hijack of your conscious mind by your reptilian brain. The stress response is that part of your nervous system that's very old, and it is protecting you from whatever it is that you're perceiving as a threat. It is the fight, flight, or freeze response. And it becomes very automatic, and it can look really subtle, especially when it's the freeze and the flight response. But the biggest problem with it is it hijacks your conscious mind. Your prefrontal cortex that manages your executive function is no longer working as well when you're in a stress response pattern. That means it's harder for you to make conscious decisions and for you to use willpower, for you to really be thinking about your positive future. And so even if you haven't had huge amounts of traumas that you're aware of, or even feel stressed, you're very likely getting hijacked by your stress patterns, and your conscious mind isn't as available as you'd like.
I want to really emphasize, because when we talk about some of those really harsh adverse childhood reactions, the abuse, neglect, addiction, incarceration, divorce, domestic violence, when people have had a lot of this, if you look at all the incarcerated people that are in jails today, they are there because of adverse childhood experiences. And we're seeing more and more prisons that are actually addressing these issues. But just because like if I think about my life, I can't say I've had abuse. Neglect is subjective. Maybe sometimes my parents didn't pay attention to me when I wanted them to pay attention to me. I didn't have addiction, didn't have incarceration, didn't have divorce, didn't have domestic violence. But I can tell you from hundreds of rest sessions I have done now, that it doesn't have to be that. I mean, it could just be as simple as somebody took away your pacifier, because as an adult, that seems like not a big deal. But for a child, their world has just changed. And children are purely emotional beings. They don't have a prefrontal cortex. They don't have a logical brain. That doesn't really actually get fully developed until your mid-20s. So you may remember things that have happened to you when you were 7 years old or 10 years old, but most likely you don't remember things that happened to you when you were 2 years old. We deal with a lot with things that happen with people when they're 2 years old, or maybe at birth or a couple of days after birth. And these are things you don't remember, but the rest technique allows us to draw that out of your subconscious mind so we can go back and find the memory. And I know Cindy's got some examples. So back to you, Cindy.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect to help us understand how extreme it can be if you've had these really profound or mini traumas. So the amount of trauma does matter. So there's two things that matter on whether it gets carried forward. The amount of trauma matters, but the other thing that matters is whether or not it was processed at the time or not. And very often things don't get processed at the time. And then what happens is you have these major traumas, they add up. So to give you an example from some of my clients, so I work with a lot of highly professional people. And last week, I was working with somebody who she's a CEO of a company. It's a small business. She has several employees. And they've been struggling in this pandemic to stay afloat, but they're staying afloat. But the stress of all of that has been getting to her, and she has been finding herself, really outraged with her employees and having a very hard time holding back her disdain and her frustration and her concern of their incompetence. And she knew that her reaction was actually making them more stressed and sabotaging what she was trying to do, which was to shore up her business. So I worked with her with rest, and one of the things we found is something that she had not recalled on a conscious level. But when she was 3, she had a stepsister come live with her. So all of a sudden she had a new sister, and that stepsister took away her scissors that she had been using effectively and told her, "You're too small, I can do it better," and basically took away her power. That subconscious implicit memory was coming up when she was working with her employees as a CEO and sabotaging her ability to be the best leader of her business she really wanted to be. And so it can really be like that simple. And so she has just been so thrilled by the work that we've been doing, because it's really allowing her to much more gracefully surf this pandemic and the economic insecurities and the employees that are also stressed out, and just be able to manage with what she's passionate about in her life.
So that was really, really helpful. And I love this image. As I've been listening to you, there's so much that speaks to me with this image.
That image, I'll just have to say something about it. I showed this image in one of my classes, and I found out that that was at Burning Man. Oh, so the last slide really is just to just say that when you access these subconscious patterns that you don't even know are there, when you find those hidden traumas, you can integrate them into your prefrontal cortex. You can integrate them into consciousness. It creates a breakthrough in your nervous system and resilience overnight. I mean, it's incredibly powerful what this technique can do. And what that does for you is that it allows you to be the diamond that you have always known yourself to be, because you are now able to handle the stress much more effectively. So I love this quote: "A diamond is just a piece of charcoal that handled stress exceptionally well."
Good stuff. Mitra, is there anything else that you want to add before I move on?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. So I want to just, I know some of the words that she was using, you may or may not be familiar with what implicit memory means or prefrontal cortex means, but I'm going to break it down really simply, okay? When we're little emotional beings. We pick up our mom's emotions. We're sensing, we don't have words yet. We don't have logic yet. We can't process logically, you know, and of course there's developmental stages. But when we're little, as soon as you come out, you feel cold, you feel happy, you cry, you laugh, you know, like think of little babies. And most of the time it's fine, but every once in a while you have an experience that's highly emotional, and it's not logical. It's just a bunch of different emotions that come up. Maybe it's because somebody took away a toy from you. Maybe it's because it doesn't have to be as extreme as what we described earlier. And this is what happens. We have subclinical PTSD all the time. And rest is non-invasive brain surgery. That's the best way I can explain it. There is actual data that once you do a session like this, what happens is that we could take an image of how your brain was firing before and after a session. You sleep that night, the logical prefrontal cortex, your logical brain, your forebrain, talks to your emotional brain and says, let's rewrite that memory. In fact, let's rewrite not just that memory, but every other memory that's kind of got triggered by that initial first memory. So we pull out the dandelion by the roots. We don't just go mowing the lawn. We actually yank out the root. So what happens is it's like a domino. All the other times, like you may have a memory as a 7-year-old that something happened, but I promise you something happened before then. And you only remember the 7-year-old memory, but you don't remember the 2-year-old memory or the 2-day memory. And when we get to the 2-day memory, the original event, boom, 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 the 7-year-old memory also goes down. So your brain in that night rewrites all the memories. So what happens is now you just have a clean slate. And you can just, you know, you don't have that stress response, because when you have that stress response, it slows down oxygen flow to the brain. You cannot think. You ever get caught? Like, I'll give you some examples. Is there somebody in your life who pushes your buttons? You know, it could be like your husband doesn't put away the stuff in the kitchen in the right way. I promise you that's worthy of a rest session. Like, and you may think of it like, oh, it's just, you know, the stuff getting put away properly in the kitchen. But I promise you there's other things that are happening in your life where you have the similar, like, incompetence, like the example that Cindy was saying. If you have this response that people out in the world are incompetent, there's a rest session that needs to happen around that, right? If you have any kind of judgment, and we all have judgments around other people, and we have judgments about ourselves. All of those things, every time you have a repeated, you know, judgment for other people and for yourself, that's worthy of a rest session, because there's a lot going on. It's not just a simple little thing. We are filled with subclinical post-traumatic, you know, disorders, right? Stress disorders. So we really want to address that. And like when we think about all these people in prison and all the, what I think about the potential of what rest can do, not just for the CEOs and the people who want to, the entrepreneurs, of course them, but as well as what we can do for our soldiers, our incarcerated, you know, people of all. This is why I'm so passionate about getting this technology out to people.
Absolutely. And I'm thinking any upper limit stuff. If a woman's coming up against a block of feeling like she consistently can't trust people, or feels unworthy, or has some upper limit to financial income where she just can't seem to block through, it seems like any of that.
Yes. All of it, all of that, and any of that. And it's really interesting how these things unfold. You learn so much about yourself. And all of a sudden, people start, after a rest session, they're like, oh, I can see how this pattern, this emotional pattern has been sort of an underlying theme in my whole life. And then we get to rewrite the narrative of your life. After like 5 or 10 sessions, we get to rewrite the entire narrative of your life, a much more empowering one that it's like, your natural, and you realize, wow, my natural state is brilliant, is shiny like a diamond, you know? And so that's why we're so excited about this technology.